Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this edition of DevOps Practitioner Series. We are in episode number 7, and I have Manoj Garg, who has 21 years of experience in banking technologies, has a breadth of experience in setting up and leading global operations and delivery teams across. He has experience in establishing high-performing technology teams using modern concepts of engineering and DevOps. He is the global head of DevOps Center of Excellence for Natwest Group and also leads the enterprise engineering teams in India. In his role, his focus is on transformation at enterprise level, establishing culture of experimenting and learning. I love this, Manoj, because this is something which we don't get a lot of our leaders think about it. We tell it in by things and is continuously releasing value to customers around with high level of security and reliability. It's a pleasure, Manoj, to have you on board for this edition. I hope you're doing well and staying safe.
Thanks, Suresh. I'm very, very glad to be here and be speaking on a topic that I love.
Excellent. So we'll kind of kickstart with some of those industry trends, because the theme today, there's a lot of buzz around ops, right? Whether ops will be relevant anymore, are we going to go towards the SRE way? So let's talk about a debate around the industry trends on ops. What's working, what's not working, and how do we kind of work through this model? What do you think is, and there are concepts like no ops to start with, and SRE, where the future of operations is changing. So what's your first take on no ops? That's a buzzword that people are using.
That's a great question. I kind of tried it myself, and I have some experience in this space. So I think let's start with why we're talking about ops in general, right? See, I think the industry has been evolving a lot, right? And in my opinion, why we're talking about ops in general is because it is, human beings are at the center of this. Human capital, human intelligence is at the center of this. All of us as engineers would have handled incidents. They're nasty. They're not, you don't want to be sitting in those calls, which, go for hours and, nights and, God knows how many nights you have spent on those, right? And then post-mortems of the root causes where, everyone is kind of scared if, I'll be blamed for this or I'll be blamed for this, right? And then, a buzzword called human error, that everything can be, brushed under the carpet using the human error. So in my opinion, that is one of the big drivers. Then, of course, customer centricity, the whole, technology, innovation, all of these are drivers to me, which make us talk about this topic, right? No ops. To be honest, I'm not a big believer of this, especially, having tried this myself. Let me, bring the elephant in the room. Ops is here to stay, right? However, how it stays, what will happen and how will ops be happening, that in my opinion will change a lot. If you look at it, we started from mainframes to monoliths to, microservices. Technology has changed, right? Where many years ago, there was a computer that would, probably take the whole room, to now a very, very powerful phone that we carry and so much of IT services that we use out of that.
Correct.
Of course, the ops has to change. Correct. It has to be much more aligned with dev, in my opinion. It has to be much more technology savvy, right? It has to be very, very advanced in terms of, its own understanding of modern technologies.
Right.
So, no, that's not for me, right? I think the whole low ops or, SRE, the concepts which are about continuous improvement, the proximity of dev and ops, and, continuous improvement, those are the kind of things that I'm a big believer of, Suresh.
Absolutely. So the trend is also about, we have been doing service management for a long period of time. Now there is another aspect of site reliability engineering coming on. If you remember from Google's history in terms of getting SRE around 2003, now there's a lot of buzz around SRE. Is that a kind of a new, a demand as a part of old wine in a new bottle, or do you think there is a merit on site reliability engineering? How is it different? And as a technology company, how do you look at unleashing any opportunities within the tech space when it comes to SRE?
Yeah. So I think SRE, I'm a little more confident than, probably NoOps, or a lot more confident than NoOps. One, it's a very well structured, proven model, right? Of course, it has been done in one of your biggest organizations, tech organizations. And I think there is a very, very strong, process backing behind it. There's a lot of research that has come out, of the topic, right? And it's not like NoOps where it's a buzzword. I think here you can go area by area, the discipline by discipline, and you can pretty much unwind and say, how do I do that, right? Correct. So that is one reason why I think this makes sense.
Right.
The other reason, and you spoke about unleashing the value that it does. Again, human beings I'll touch upon, right? Why do we want to separate out, the devs and DevOps? Why not, everybody is working on the same kind of the outcomes, right? And that gives a career, a happiness quotient, if you like, to my ops staff, right? It makes my customers happy, right? It helps me organize or manage my toil a lot more because, there's a focus on that. And the big one, as the name suggests, site reliability engineering. I think for a long time, we haven't really sat down and discussed what kind of availability I want for my system, right? And is it like 100% reliability is a myth, right? We all know.
Correct.
But have we over-invested in terms of human capital to, give services 100% time, all the times to my customers, whereas actually that's not required.
Correct.
And I'll actually just quote an example. When I sat down doing this, for one of my areas, there were systems where we had 24/7 eyes on the glass, support or operations available. But when I looked at the whole tickets and the calls that we were getting, we were actually not getting any calls in the night. I mean, we were maybe 0.5% in a year.
Right.
So yeah.
You probably have to make it up the way we work on that. So would that also change gears, Manoj, in terms of ITSM and SRE? Because in ITSM, we talk about incident management. And of course, in ITIL 4, we bring in that value chain concept. Do you think that today's service management team is going to evolve with SRE? Is it something that we need to relearn, unlearn a lot of these stuff as we move towards an SRE model? Or do you think that, because I think traditionally service management has been paid not a good attention around the DevOps space. We are probably looking at, keeping the lights on, look at stability part of it. But we are talking about much more beyond stability around reliability and resilience, which cannot be done without having an end-to-end value chain thought about it. So do you think that the service management space is kind of moving towards there, or people gearing up with there, or there's still a lot of work to be done to catch up on that SRE journey?
I think it's both, actually. There are people who are accelerating themselves and increasing their learning abilities, or investing into themselves. At the same time, there are cases, actually, and I'll not blame people. There have been cases where there have been disasters in terms of things going down in production, and people are a little more protective, around the production. So see, I'm not going to say this is good or that is good, right? I think, in my opinion, there is a learning opportunity. Some people have started the journey. Some will start the journey. Things are changing, definitely, right? A person who cannot change the system sitting and managing an incident, I'm not a big fan of that, right? If this person does not even know what's written inside the code, why should this person be wasting his night? Why not the person who has written the code?
Correct. And in terms of the pitfalls, right? Because people still think, and particularly in a banking and financial services kind of a sector, right? People think SRE might be too difficult to implement because there's a lot of checks and balance, regulatory compliances and other stuff. So what are some of the common pitfalls people face while moving to SRE? And particularly, I'm also interested on the financial institution space, because there's a lot of regulatory and risk. Some people say that we're not like Google, like retail that we can do, or we look like Netflix doing chaos engineering. You have to understand the environment that we operate. So how do you play that in your experience, Manoj?
Yeah, so banking or any regulated industry for that matter, right? We have to have some checks and balances. We I am a believer that these checks and balances, keep us honest. So,
Right.
not going against them, right?
Right.
I think, maybe not every discipline of SRE, I'll be able to implement today.
Correct.
I think the common pitfall is that people will say, okay, it doesn't meet 100% of my requirements. Hence, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
I'll apply 80-20 formula.
Right.
There are a lot of things that SRE tells me today that, I don't have to wait for, industry to evolve or regulations to change or anything. I can start now.
Correct.
Right. For example, bringing the devs and ops closer, right? That doesn't mean that, I have to change the permissions and rights, etc. It merely means that they should have the same kind of backlog. The toil should get the right kind of prioritization. My engineers, my ops engineers should be more technical, or we should invest more into them. These kind of things, we should absolutely do that.
Right.
So pitfalls, one, as I said, right, I'll only apply it if it fits into my requirements 100%. That to me is a common pitfall that I've seen. The second pitfall is it's an org change. A lot of people think that, I make the org change and, the ops and dev is merged and that's it. My job is done. I think that's the other, pitfall that I see. Third, one that I see is not upfront managing your tech stack, right? I think there's a lot of investment that we have to do in, the alerting, the observability, and, identifying your availability and reliability and, those kind of things, right? It's a heavy lifting. You have to do all of that pre-work before we can, start that journey.
Right.
So, and lastly, maybe, I think investing into people, right? That goes without saying. Human capital, as I said, I've been saying, that is tremendous, and we haven't really used it to look its potential.
Sure. And in terms of the way SREs are being dealt with, one of the things is about, hey, where do you start? It's like a big elephant. Where do you start? We know that even if you want to bite an elephant, you need to do it in chunks. So if an organization is stepping into the journey of Sitetolab engineering, where do they think they have to start? Or there are any prerequisites? So for example, like you need to have monitoring in place. You need to have some level of prerequisite before you even think about, SRE. So is there a kind of a checklist or a blueprint around what we are supposed to do before you start the journey towards SRE?
I mean, look, every journey is different, Suresh. I think, that, I don't believe in one size fits all. Right. Every organization is different. Every industry is different. So, in my opinion, some of the key things, and the biggest to me is the leadership buy-in.
Right.
Leadership has to be really standing behind it, and they need to see the power, right? So that to me is the real first step. The second, maybe a pitfall or maybe a guidance that I can tell people: don't pick the hardest or the most controversial piece. You don't want to be picking the your most critical trading platform to transform into SRE, and then any small mishap can actually lead to the failure. Bang on, right? Yeah. So that is the second thing that I'll suggest. Third, I think I touched upon that. Once you categorize, right, which are the ones you want to go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then invest in them, right? Invest in terms of your people, invest in terms of your tools, right? Invest in terms of customers, right? Your customer got to see, for example, that this is the level of service they are going to get. I mean, it may be 95% availability, 96% availability. They may be used to of 100% availability, which is an underlying myth, anyways. So the point is, bring them to the journey as well. Now coming to the team level, I am a big believer that there can't be multiple backlogs. Right, there has to be one backlog, which is the dev ops. They both are responsible for that. Last but not the least, common objectives. Right, you cannot have devs objective which are delivery aligned only, and ops which is only to mitigate or control the risk. you have to have both of them, kind of working together in complement, not contrary to each other.
Right. And I think some people think that if you make a change to squads, this is a very familiar term people call it as, Spotify using squad model, let's put people into a name, they rename a scrum team to a squad and then say that, chalo, we are trying to do this one, can we make this work? So is that a kind of fad, or is it there a reality or merit in moving towards a squad model as we start to gain through this exercise? Because sometimes people have that illusion that once you go to squad, it will all work, or rebrand your name towards something like that. So how is that dealt in terms of closer collaboration between dev and ops? Because one of the problems we also see is we don't have a common metric, as you said, common objective that cuts across. We are still measuring by lines of code or user stories deployed towards keeping the lights on response time. So how has this model of SRE itself has evolved? Do you think that organizations are moving towards a squad Spotify model, or is it something that they have their own ways of working? Is it still working? And that's my question.
So I think there were, at least in my case, my observations, there were initial hiccups. There were, you have to bring people to the journey, right? And there was, once we started demonstrating the real value of it, right? And you really have to be repeating yourself multiple times and demonstrate that you're valuing the outcomes, the kind of outcomes that we're talking about, right? So initial hiccups, yes, of course, but once people saw the journey and people actually saw the cases where the careers were kind of getting transformed, and we could demonstrate, in terms of the failure demand or toil, as you like, right? We could demonstrate that 80%, 60%, 70% of this is now done, and the people who were just doing ops, right, they have started developing themselves into engineers, and they're very, very keen to pick engineering problems now. So I think sorry, it's a journey, and you have to be you have to be in the face with metrics, with user stories, with customer stories, and keep motivating people. Once they see it, there's no stopping. Everybody wants to do that.
Sure. I think that's a point. And so what are the common challenges that you see people typically face in this SRE? You did highlight some of those things, that people are not very clear about what is the outcome at the beginning. It's like experimentation, it's iteration, you had hiccups. But beyond that, there are any challenges to adopt to SRE and new ways of working? Have you seen any other challenges that loomingly big?
It's very ironical, actually. I kept saying that it was for people, it was for human, capital and all that. But to be honest, the first biggest hurdle you hit is people, right? And the question will be, oh, I'm a dev, why should I be in the incident? That's not my job. Or I'm from ops, I don't know how to code, I don't know engineering that well. That was like one of the inertia, if you like, right? That was one of the things. Skill gap, we had to invest. I had to invest a lot, right? The model that we use is everybody has a personal development plan. These people, on quarterly basis, they learn something. We'll invest a lot in people. I think the risk factors, right? As I said, segregation of duties. Why should this person have access to code or production and all that? That is a challenge, and which is why you have to pick your battles. As I said, right? Maybe you don't want to pick a regulatory reporting system as your first case study, right? So that's the challenge. And last, at least when I was attempting the no-ops element, I think, as I said, we went in the model of let's organize differently instead of, okay, let's automate, let's put this tool, let's do this, let's manage the toil. So that was the initial sort of challenge.
Right. And in terms of what are some of the early advantages? You did mention a very key point. When you pick certain applications to be onboarded on SRE, be very, very careful. Don't put the critical applications on stake. So what were some of the early advantages that you had to prove in order to sustain in that SRE journey? Because as you know, it's a marathon, right? It's not a short term. So how do you build in the momentum where you mentioned a great point about creating that visibility where people say that, okay, there is a merit in what we do. There is a method to madness and we can replicate it. But then you should show some early advantages for people to buy in the concept, right? You got a leadership buy-in, but the people on the ground should see the visible results. So what are some of the early advantages that you have seen, and how did they motivate the journey of that moving forward?
I think once it was settled and we saw, some of the toil being managed and, people using different things, happiness index, something that we calculate that improved, right? And now people are not really, not in the graveyard shift, right? That's the worst thing that you can do to a human being.
Correct.
Right. So happiness index was one of the things. Failure demand or toil, as you call it, right? The reduction in that, and people actually doing some, valuable engineering tickets instead of, I'm creating a user, I'm running a report, those kind of things.
Right.
Stability, right? I think I haven't seen a tier 1, tier 2 kind of incident in a long time in the kind of systems that we work in. And a big synergy, right? Suddenly, that invisible wall between dev and ops, that invisible wall doesn't seem to be there. They sit in the same team. There's the same, they join the same scrum. They work together. So I think these are a few of the early ones. Last, I think at least there are some cases that I've seen where people have transformed their careers themselves, right? From ops to now engineer, or a DevOps engineer, or a proper engineer. That all I've seen, and that's very, very encouraging.
So great. I think we could have talked for hours, but then be conscious of the time. So what would be your key takeaways in the world of journey on the ops part, and what do you think would be the future of ops? I know that we're trying to predict it from the castle, but no, with your industry experience and what you see as a trends, what's going to be the future of ops, and where does someone in operations field should focus their effort in, both as a team level, at an enterprise level? Where do you think is the big bet for operations moving forward?
I think, as I said, ops is here to stay, definitely. I'm a big believer of that. If you are in ops, in my opinion, you should start investing in yourself. There are a lot of new technologies which are coming, for example, learning Python, just invest in that, right? Or the systems that you are working in. The good thing is, if you are in ops, you have an attitude which is, you can't learn anywhere, which is, sense of urgency, understanding the, customer's point of view. All of those good things you already have. What you need to do is, learn some of the newer technology trends, etc. And the combination of those two is very, very powerful, in my opinion. So yeah, I think be more tech savvy.
And I think the whole industry, as we start to see as a shift, is evolving. And I think, as you rightly said, the operation is here to stay. And if someone wants to know more about, connecting and reaching out to you, what is the best way to reach out to you? As part of, there's a lot of people who need coaching and mentoring to real world practitioners. One of the reasons we started this episode, Manoj, was to bring in real world practitioners who have done and dusted this over and over again, rather than not by the books that we have seen. So if someone is interested to kind of reach out and get some perspectives beyond that, what would be, what do you suggest? How they can reach you as part of the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I think, LinkedIn, I'm very, very active on LinkedIn.
Sure.
I need to learn to be active on Twitter. I have the account, but I'm not very active, but maybe now I'll start using. So yeah, these are the two main channels.
Sure. And thank you so much, Manoj, for sharing your insights around it. So one thing is heartening for people in production support, that is, there is still jobs. There is nothing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
There's nothing called no ops, and hopefully we will see this trend moving towards a healthy direction. And thanks again for sharing your insights, and we hope to see you in more such kind of forums in future. Yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure, and absolutely glad to be here anytime. Thanks.
Thank you very much.